Hello and welcome to Teachings in Education, ESL and ELL Education. You are here with your favorite educator, Frank Avella. In this video, we're going to cover everything you ever wanted to know about working with ELL and ESL students. A variety of different topics will be covered, such as second language acquisition and instructional strategies, but we're going to begin with a broad overview. Now, ELL students often fall through the cracks. That's because they are usually well behaved, their parents aren't typically involved, and they don't get the same attention as special education students. There are many associated acronyms. ELL, meaning English Language Learner, ESL, English as Second Language, LEP, Limited English Proficiency. These may soon be replaced by a more positive term called Emergent Bilingual. Nevertheless, terminology is not important. Understand that teaching these children is a very challenging task. As a teacher, you're going to have your work cut out for you. Unfortunately, some teachers feel that it isn't their responsibility to teach these students that don't speak English. There are a number of teachers that feel anxiety. The anxiety comes from the fact that schools seldom prepare teachers. On to the next section, which is accommodations. Teachers must provide ELL students with equal access to the curriculum through accommodations. These accommodations are meant to help ELLs understand simple things that are asked of them. With the help of these accommodations, ELLs should better be able to keep up with their work and maintain the pace of instruction set forth by the teacher. Here are some common examples. Teachers may provide different types of graphic organizers, concrete manipulatives for math, scaffolding or flashcards for vocabulary, extended time, peer tutoring, audiobooks, and even having content presented in their native language. The next section up is communication tips for teachers. Educators should use certain strategies to better help communicate with ELLs. The first strategy is to avoid speaking in idioms and acronyms. Both are particularly confusing for new language learners. Next, teachers should not raise their voice when directly talking to the child. The child may think that you are yelling at them. Enunciate. Your words will sound clearer and your ELL students will better understand each word that you say. Use hand signals. Use your hand signals as much as you can. Be animated in the way you teach. Communication doesn't have to be all verbal. Take the time to summarize what was just taught through short notes. Be sure to frequently check for understanding, as there is no doubt going to be times where ELLs get lost during instruction. Look at their faces, it'll tell you everything. And lastly, speak slowly, do not rush. Classroom instruction is not a race, it's about learning. The next section covers BICS and CALP, and credit given to Jim Cummins. CALP stands for Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency. BICS, on the other hand, stands for Basic Interpersonal Communication Skills. CALPS is basically your content language. On the other hand, BICS is more of your social language. Proficiency for CALP is based on the ability to understand academic language for different content subjects. It takes about 5 years for students to learn this language type. This is the type of language proficiency that is integrated with higher order thinking skills. For example, Bloom's taxonomy. BICS relates to the skills necessary to have a casual conversation with your group of friends. BICS can take as early as 6 months to master. It also includes your everyday slang or the basic language that you use while on the phone with your friend or your mother. Next, we're going to cover the 5 stages of second language acquisition, with credit to Julie Haynes. And the first stage is the pre-production stage. The pre-production stage is also called the silent period. The period of time lasts anywhere from a day to 6 months. You can expect students to have a vocabulary of only 500 words. This is also sometimes called the absorbing phase. Students are just trying to absorb what is being said. Students may simply repeat things that were said. This is in an effort to understand its meaning. They parrot back phrases. This is a very stressful time for the student. They aren't able to express themselves verbally. One thing to do is to incorporate more visuals into the lesson, but there are many more. The next phase is early production. Early production has a duration period that lasts about 6 months. The amount of words that are in the vocabulary increased to 1,000. At this point, you'll begin to hear some meaningful speech from ELLs. They may speak in 1 or 2 word sentences. As a teacher, you can provide some semantic graphic organizers. Although you don't really want to modify the content unless it's absolutely necessary, this may be a stage where it is necessary. And of course, you would want to use your CFUs, meaning check for understandings. Right now, I'm going to take a quick break and ask if you could give me a quick like and a subscribe if you can. Anyway, let's get back to the lesson. The third stage of second language acquisition is speech emergence. This stage lasts approximately 1 year in length. Students have a vocabulary of about 3,000 words. You'll see students coming into their own. They'll be able to speak in short sentences and ask questions. Even more, they should actually start to understand everything that is being said in the classroom. Continuing, we'll get to the fourth stage, which is intermediate fluency. This is a period that lasts approximately 2 years. The ELL students also have a vocabulary of around 600 words. Students in the classroom will begin to question some of the things that are said. They will build ideas off of the content that was covered. This is also the point where ELLs will start to have conversations in English with other students. Teachers may want to scaffold assignments for ELLs, but overall, teachers should be decreasing the amount of assistance at this point. And now to the last stage of second language acquisition, which is the advanced fluency stage. It has a duration that lasts anywhere from 4 to 10 years. ELLs have built up an extensive vocabulary, and that vocabulary will continue to increase. This far into second language acquisition, students will start to feel as if English is their native language. Now, just because these students speak English well, doesn't mean they still don't need the extra help for the content matter. So we finished up with the stages of second language acquisition, and now we're going to move on to sheltered instruction. Let's begin with some of the goals of sheltered instruction. Educators want to see students develop proficiency in English, as well as provide access to grade level content. Sheltered instruction is based on the principle of equal content, where teachers do not dumb down the lesson. Now I have to say, this is not as easy as it sounds, and most teachers do need assistance in utilizing sheltered instruction, perhaps bringing in professional development. Here's a quick list of some associated strategies. Use simplified language, give extra wait time, sensory activities, access prior knowledge, use visuals, pair students with native speakers, don't force speaking, know student cultures, and many, many more. Now we're going to move on to some recommended instructional strategies for working with these children. And the first one is to use a culture study. Culture studies are a great lesson for ELLs because most children are proud of their culture. There are several benefits to culture studies, such as the development of research skills, public speaking skills, and it even gives students a chance to hone their writing abilities. What are the steps for a culture study? The first is to assign students to research their ethnic background as a class project. Students should then take the time and do the research, and one way to do that is to interview their family members. After all the work is done, students should present to the classroom. Getting ELLs to present and speak in front of a crowd is always a good thing. And lastly, have students take questions from the audience. This is great for two-way dialogue. A great alternative to culture studies would be to do a show and tell lesson. Now on to the second of 6 recommended instructional strategies, Realia. Realia is basically incorporating real-life objects into the classroom. It's great for making word connections. Also, adding real-life objects into the classroom will get the attention of those students that are bored all the time. It is a multi-sensory experience. Students get to see, hear, touch, and possibly taste. Vocabulary is the most common way to use Realia in the classroom, is to have a student just read a word like apple. But with Realia, they make a deeper connection with the brain. As a side note, it's sometimes used in a science classroom, as it's not just for ESL. Science teachers bring in models. I feel obligated to point out that these types of lessons do take a lot of work. The next strategy is a language experience approach. Here, students' life lessons become part of the classroom. It's a great way to get these kids engaged, It also helps them increase their sight word recognition. Through reading their own life stories, they start to improve on their fluency more and more. Let me walk you through the process. It begins when an ELL student tells one of their life stories. The student tells their story verbally at first. Next, teachers usually have a paraprofessional write down the story as the student tells it. They should write it down word for word. The student can read the story to themselves at first. Once they've mastered it with assistance, then they can read the story alone. There are other variations on the language experience approach. The fourth instructional strategy is group work. So let's dive in. The great thing about group work for ELLs is that it increases face-to-face interactions. Students experience social learning through connecting with their peers. They also have a dialogue around concepts and content. Sometimes friendships develop. ELLs need friends to help them get around the school when they're new, to translate, and to be there for them. Group work even works for students in the silent period of second language acquisition because they can learn by observation. Some of the ways to integrate group work is to give projects, labs, jigsaw activities, and many more. Some subjects are more inclined to group work than others. The fifth strategy is total physical response, abbreviated here as TPR. Total physical response, TPR, integrates physical activity with learning. From my experience, students enjoy getting up and getting out of their seats. Therefore, you could expect your students to appreciate this lesson. To get started, the teacher should first model the vocabulary word or action for the student. The word here is meditate, and the teacher is showing the student what it really means to do so. When it's a noun, something like a desk, you can simply ask the student to point to the desk. Students are still allowed to get out of their seats to do the pointing. Of course, actions are a little bit more suited when it comes to TPR. For example, things like waving are easy. Teaching the students to jump, so teachers need to make sure that they are actually saying the words while they're performing the actions. And I have to mention that the writing component should be incorporated into the lesson. Just as students have to say, they should also have to write. On to the last instructional strategy, which includes a number of typical supports for ELLs. When the ELLs are new to the classroom, the teacher should first assign a classroom buddy or friend. Earlier I mentioned that ELLs need friends for both social and academic purposes. To make it easier on these children, write in print as opposed to script. Grant these students extended time on their exams. This goes back to the accommodations described. Give them preferential seating, and that often means not by the teacher, but by the assigned classroom buddy. Try to smile and have a warm disposition with ELLs. Procedures are great because these students can learn through observation and follow the crowd. Teachers should have procedures in place regardless of ELLs or not. And lastly, lessons have to be well planned out. The language barrier makes it really difficult for both parties. And now we're going to finish up this wonderful lesson with getting the families of ELL students more involved in the school. And the first way to do that is to invite them to be chaperones on field trips. Specifically, reach out to ELL parents and encourage them to be chaperones. When sending emails to parents, you should translate them because a large majority of these parents do not speak or read English. If they don't come to you, then you gotta go to them. Attend their cultural events. Schools should do their best to make these parents stakeholders and decision makers. Very rarely do you see these parents on school improvement committees. Identify the parents that need to have interpreters and make sure that they get an interpreter whenever there's a meeting. Schools send out welcome letters, but teachers can send out their individual welcome letters also. And lastly, integrate their culture with that of your classroom. That includes more than just hanging up flags and posters. It means making serious changes to the curriculum. Right now, I want to say thank you for your time. Please check the description for a link to my ELL presentation. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you.